Russia announced on Monday that it will no longer adhere to a decades-old nuclear missile treaty with the United States, fueling concerns over the potential revival of a Cold War-style arms race. The decision comes just days after former U.S. President Donald Trump ordered the redeployment of 2 nuclear submarines, citing threatening remarks by Dmitry Medvedev, the former Russian president and current deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council. In recent weeks, the Trump administration has intensified pressure on Russian President Vladimir Putin to bring an end to the war in Ukraine. The collapse of the INF Treaty carries far-reaching consequences for both global and regional security. With treaty restrictions no longer in place, the United States and Russia are free to develop and deploy land-based intermediate-range missiles, a shift that raises the specter of a renewed arms race, particularly in Europe and the Indo-Pacific. In this video, Defense Updates analyzes why end of INF Treaty has grave implications for the world. Before we proceed, a word on NordVPN, which is one of the most trusted and fastest VPN brand that has a no-log policy validated by Deloitte. NordVPN provides a 256-bit encrypted tunnel that protects your privacy and also enables you to access contents that are blocked based on geolocation. Its threat protection system helps you avoid phishing, scams, and malware. NordVPN application is available for all the major platforms as well as browsers. Get an exclusive NordVPN deal with massive saving by going to nordvpn.com/defense or clicking the link in the description. It's risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The Intermediate-Range Nuclear Forces (INF) Treaty, signed in 1987 by U.S. President Ronald Reagan and Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev, was a groundbreaking arms control agreement that banned all ground-launched ballistic and cruise missiles with ranges between 500 and 5,500 kilometers, roughly 310 and 3,420 miles. It was the first treaty to eliminate an entire category of nuclear weapons and included robust verification measures, such as on-site inspections. Entering into force on June 1, 1988, the INF Treaty led to the destruction of nearly 2,700 missiles by the early 1990s. Its implementation played a major role in de-escalating Cold War tensions, particularly in Europe, by removing short and intermediate-range nuclear missiles that could strike key targets within minutes. Rising tensions over the INF Treaty began in the early 2010, culminating in a formal U.S. accusation in 2014 that Russia had violated the agreement by testing a ground-launched cruise missile with a range exceeding treaty limits. The missile, later identified as the Novator 9M729 NATO designation SSC-8, quickly became the center of the controversy. American officials asserted that the missile's range clearly fell within the prohibited category and accused Moscow of deploying it in direct violation of the treaty. Russia rejected the claims, maintaining that the 9M729 was fully compliant and, in turn, accused the United States of undermining the treaty through its missile defense systems in Europe and the use of armed drones. Meanwhile, officials in Washington pointed to China, never a signatory to the INF Treaty, as a growing concern, citing its expanding missile arsenal developed without any treaty restrictions as a serious threat to regional and global stability. The standoff escalated in October 2018 when President Donald Trump announced that the United States would withdraw from the INF Treaty, citing Russia's noncompliance. Washington formally suspended its treaty obligations in February 2019 and completed its full withdrawal on August 2nd of the same year. In response, Russia suspended its own participation and later declared the agreement null and void. Kremlin didn't immediately deploy the missiles. On August 4, 2025, Russia officially abandoned its self-imposed moratorium on deploying intermediate-range missiles. Russian officials defended the decision to abandon the INF framework by pointing to what they described as a shifting global security environment. Moscow accused the United States of undermining the treaty's spirit by developing and preparing to deploy land-based intermediate-range missiles, thereby upsetting the strategic balance. Citing plans by Washington to station Typhoon and Dark Eagle missile systems in Germany beginning next year, the Kremlin argued that such actions left it with no choice but to respond. The Russian Foreign Ministry declared that the conditions which once justified Moscow's self-imposed moratorium on INF range missile deployment had fundamentally changed. As a result, Russia would now act in accordance with its national security interests, free from previous restrictions. Russian leaders maintained that they had upheld the moratorium in good faith, but placed blame squarely on the United States and NATO for eroding the foundations of strategic stability in Europe and beyond. The implications are grave. In Europe, NATO may move to deploy new conventionally armed missile systems as a counterbalance to potential Russian deployments. In response, Russia is likely to field its own land-based systems capable of targeting NATO territory and U.S. military assets. The return of these fast-strike weapons, many with minimal warning times, threatens to destabilize crisis management and raises the risk of miscalculation or rapid escalation. In the Indo-Pacific, the absence of INF limitations opens the door for the U.S. to push back against China's growing missile arsenal by stationing ground-based intermediate-range systems in the region. However, such efforts face significant political and logistical challenges, as many regional allies remain hesitant to host U.S. missile deployments on their soil. U.S.-Russia relations have continued to decline, with the demise of the INF Treaty adding to a growing list of collapsed arms control agreements, including the Open Skies Treaty and the Anti-Ballistic Missile (ABM) Treaty. With New START now the last major treaty still in force and due to expire in 2026, the framework that once helped contain Cold War-era nuclear risks is steadily falling apart. Attempts to revive or replace the INF Treaty have made little headway. The United States has advocated for a broader arms control approach that includes not only Russia, but also China. However, Beijing has consistently rejected any participation in such frameworks, citing its smaller nuclear arsenal and different strategic priorities. In 2021, Washington and Moscow initiated a strategic stability dialogue to explore ways to modernize arms control and address emerging technologies. While the talks initially showed promise, they stalled in the wake of Russia's invasion of Ukraine and its subsequent suspension of New START verification measures, further setting back prospects for renewed cooperation. European governments and civil society organizations have urged the pursuit of new agreements to limit the deployment of intermediate-range missile systems, particularly within Europe. However, deepening mistrust between major powers, ongoing geopolitical conflicts, and a lack of political momentum have made the prospect of a new treaty unlikely in the near future. In the absence of binding agreements, the global arms control landscape is increasingly shaped by unilateral actions, informal arrangements, and growing military buildups. With no replacement for the INF Treaty, there are few effective restraints remaining, raising the risk of a renewed arms race across both Europe and the Asia-Pacific region.